Operation Gideon's Chariot is right on schedule, and the moment is drawing near when we can say that our warriors have taken full control of the ground in the Gaza Strip and achieved a strategic defeat of Hamas. Nothing less than this will ensure the return of our hostages and the long-term security of Israel. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm Yair Pinto, bringing you the truth about what's happening in Israel. The construction of 4 distribution centers operated by international aid organizations and security of the American civil society in Gaza has been completed. This represents a major strategic objective of this campaign and was carried out in close coordination between the United States and Israel as part of efforts to bring humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. After delays, 2 of the 4 centers set up to distribute food to residents of the Gaza Strip were opened for the first time this week with the aim of denying Hamas the opportunity to take over the distribution aid. The workers at these distribution centers speak of thousands of people lining up to receive the aid, and those who come receive a variety of products. However, there was also an incident where a crowd broke into a distribution center in Rafah and looted it entirely as the American guards fired in the air and helicopters were dispatched to try and bring order to the situation. According to preliminary investigation by the security system, the chaos at the center lasted about 10 minutes, but made headlines worldwide. Eyewitnesses said that the place was destroyed. The intelligence echelon has warned that this might be part of the efforts by Hamas to sabotage the aid project, but the security establishment does not intend to change the mechanism. Hamas has threatened civilians and organizations not to cooperate with the aid distribution project and try to prevent access to the centers. A United States State Department said aid entered Gaza, Hamas tried to stop it and failed. The State Department spokeswoman, Tammy Bruce, directly addressed the aid entry into Gaza in a press briefing this week, saying, "Will it be like going into the mall? No, but it's working." She also blamed the terrorist organization Hamas and said, "We could have avoided this situation if Hamas had disarmed, but they refused to do so." And meanwhile, according to a statement by the IDF Major General Hassan Aliyan, a large amount of goods has accumulated recently near the Kerem Shalom border crossing in Israel, but the United Nations refuses to cooperate. And on the diplomatic front, Hamas once again announced today that it accepted the Witkoff framework for a deal that includes a ceasefire and the withdrawal of IDF forces from the Gaza Strip. An Israeli source responded yesterday to the proposal, saying it was something that no government in Israel could accept. And additionally, according to the new details that were revealed this week about the hostage deal talks in Doha, Qatar, it turns out that Hamas representatives abroad demanded that the ceasefire be extended to 90 days rather than the 60 days proposed by Israel. In response, United States President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff told Hamas, "You will not get 1 day beyond 60. And meanwhile, on Israel's northern arena, the IDF eliminated a Hezbollah Radwan unit terrorist in another dramatic airstrike this week as the United States encourages Lebanon to follow the example of Syria and move towards normalization with Israel. Predictably, Hezbollah has issued an angry statement in response to this idea, saying we will not disarm before an Israeli withdrawal, cessation of attacks, and release of prisoners. Also today, we will bring you an interview with our own Shmulik Smadja and a journalist, Amir Tsarfati, which will give us a look behind the scenes in the context of Syria, Israel, and some of the big moves in the Middle East, including direct talks between Israeli and Syrian officials. Also in today's report, TBN Israel senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will take us through the latest United States moves in the Middle East, including the increased deployment of strategic bombers and other military assets to the island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. However, according to the report in the news portal Axios, President Trump has warned Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu not to provoke confrontations with Iran, adding, "This is not the time to escalate the situation." This comes as senior White House officials have said that President Trump is concerned about the possibility that Israel will carry out a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities during the current talks. And elsewhere, despite astronomical losses, the Houthis in Yemen continue to fire ballistic missiles at Israel, including drones. As you can see, we have a report filled of information ahead of us, so get ready and let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 600. Yes, we are now 600 days into this war that Hamas launched against us together with Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. This means that for 600 days now, here at Israel, at TBN Israel, we're bringing you the truth every day. And in order for us to continue, we need your help. So we invite you to invest in our operations so we can create more videos like this one. You can do that by subscribing to this YouTube channel and never missing another episode of Boots on the Ground. The food distribution project launched in Tel Sultan in the Gaza Strip on Tuesday may prove to be one blow too many for Hamas if it succeeds. Whoever controls the food controls the Gaza Strip, and therefore the terrorist organization is doing everything it can to sabotage this project. In accordance with the directive of the political leadership and in close coordination with the United States of America, and accompanied by continuous dialogue and coordination with the IDF through the Southern Command and COGAT, with the international aid organizations, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the establishment of 4 distribution complexes operated by the international aid organizations and secured by an American civil company in the Gaza Strip was finally completed in recent week. As part of the gradual opening of the distribution centers, 2 centers began operating on Tuesday in the Tel Sultan area and on the Morag corridor in Rafah, distributing food packages to thousands of families in the Gaza Strip. The IDF issued a statement that they will continue to enable a humanitarian response in the Gaza Strip, taking every required effort to ensure that humanitarian aid does not reach Hamas terrorists. Anyone can enter the compound where the food is distributed, including Hamas members. Therefore, it is entirely possible that Hamas operatives entered and perhaps led Tuesday's riot at the distribution center in Rafah, which resulted in looting and warning shots by the American security personnel. So what actually happened? Let's take it one step at a time. As previously mentioned, 2 aid distribution centers opened at noon on Tuesday inside the Gaza Strip for the first time, using a method designed to prevent Hamas from looting the humanitarian aid. One center opened in Tel Sultan in Rafah, and another opened in the Morag corridor area in the southern part of the Gaza Strip between Khan Yunis and Rafah. These centers opened after several days of delay, and already at noon, local residents arrived at the first time to receive aid packages containing pasta, flour, tahini, rice, sauce, fava beans, tea, biscuits, and more. The center was expected to operate until 7 p.m., and thousands of people were in line to collect the packages. This is according to the American company. The company also said that, amongst other things, that Hamas had set up a roadblock to prevent people from reaching the site, but hours later, the residents of Gaza managed to break through the Hamas barrier. The company stated that things were going smoothly, and by 2:40, 400 households had collected boxes intended for 2,500 people, and thousands more were gathering outside the distribution facility. Some, it was reported, shouted, "Thank you, America."
Thank you, America!
However, 2 hours after the center opened, reports spoke of a breach into one of the compounds and helicopter fire and the withdrawal of the American staff. A source in the Gaza Strip said that the place was destroyed and the fence was uprooted. He added that all the packages, the tables, and the chairs were taken and the Americans fled. An IDF attack helicopter was scrambling following the reports from the Americans of the chaos and the loss of control, and according to the Gazan source, it also fired. However, an Israeli source claimed that the American workers fired into the air, drove the intruders away, and regained control of the facility, noting that IDF forces fired warning shots. A security source said that the Gazan crowd entered the sterile area contrary to the regulations, and the Americans pulled back and fired into the air to regain control. However, IDF and Kogat officials who are responsible for communicating events in Gaza could not confirm that control of the incident was achieved indeed. A statement by the American company said the distribution proceeded for most of the day as planned. Towards the end of the day, about 100 Gazans stormed the distribution centers. This scenario was anticipated and drilled by the American forces. The force allowed the crowd to take the remaining daily supplies at the center in order to prevent loss of life. And Tuesday's events have sparked a lively debate on social media about what's going on, leading to questions including, in what way is the terror organization Hamas trying to disrupt the food distribution? The answers to this question include the following that were gathered from various posts by people who say that they've witnessed these events firsthand. To start with, Hamas threatens civilians and organizations so that they will not cooperate with the project. It also sets up roadblocks to prevent access to the distribution compounds and spreads rumors that Israel arrests people when they arrive there to receive the aid. And finally, it distributes alternative food itself in the El Mawasi area. Other discussions on social media centers around the question of whether it is proper to accept the food that, according to Palestinians, Israel is behind. However, the undeniable reality is that people need to eat, and most of the time they are not willing to refuse food when it becomes available just to make a political or even a moral point. On that note, officials in the American company noted that on Wednesday, a renewed distribution will begin. The teams on the ground are showing professionalism in their ability to manage the event and demonstrate Hamas's loss of control on the ground in Gaza. And meanwhile, Israel's defense establishment does not intend to change the mechanism for food distribution despite Tuesday's events in Rafah, which is basically being called a learning experience or maybe growing pains. Lessons are said to have learned, and the project will move forward with those lessons in mind. And elsewhere, United States State Department spokesperson Tamara Bruce held a briefing for journalists on Tuesday evening, passionately defending the cooperation with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and accusing Hamas of thwarting the ceasefire and attempting to sabotage the humanitarian operation, while standing up to criticism from the United Nations and the media. She said, "We have excellent news to report from Gaza. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, operating under the humanitarian principles of independence and impartiality, has begun providing urgently needed aid to Gazans. 8,000 food deliveries have been distributed so far, with each box feeding 5.5 people for 3.5 days, 462,000 meals in total." When asked about the warning shots fired today following the disturbances, she said, "Hamas still has weapons. We could have avoided the situation if Hamas has dismantled, but they refused to do so. They also rejected the ceasefire. The fact that Hamas opposed this dynamic and targeted the movement of Gazans to the distribution centers means that they failed, but they certainly tried." Finally, Bruce jabbed at European countries over their statements about recognizing a Palestinian state, saying, regarding the United Kingdom, Canada, France, and other countries that last week took disappointing steps towards unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state, these are unproductive moves that undermine American efforts to establish peace in this region. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development. And as always, we ask you to keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. Most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, before we move on, I want to take a moment to remind you that Israel is still under fire, literally. Communities are hurting, families are displaced, and forests and homes have been destroyed. This isn't just a headline. This is happening right now, and that's why we cannot wait. We're reviving our campaign to restore what has been lost, and we need your help. We're planting trees, rebuilding lives, and standing strong when it matters most. But we can't do it alone, and this is the moment to act. So please, don't sit this one out or scroll past this. Be part of something that brings real change right here, right now. Go to tbn.org/rebuildisrael and give. Again, that's tbn.org/rebuildisrael. Let's turn destruction into renewal together. Now back to the news, and against the backdrop of reports of ongoing negotiations between Israel and Hamas to reach a ceasefire and a hostage release deal, the Palestinian news agency Shihab reported on Tuesday once again that Hamas has accepted Stephen Witkoff's framework for a deal. This comes after Egyptian media reported earlier in the week that Hamas agreed to the framework, all in an effort to increase pressure against Israel. Hamas's political bureau member Bassem Naim told the Palestinian news agency, "We accepted Witkoff's proposal for a ceasefire and a troop withdrawal, and we are awaiting Israel's response." He added, "The gist of Witkoff's proposal includes achieving a ceasefire, a withdrawal of forces, and a permanent ceasefire." An Israeli source referred to this report saying the draft that reached Israel overnight is a text that no Israeli government could have accepted. Its meaning is abandonment of the war's objective, a de facto surrender. It is very far from the framework advised by Stephen Witkoff and indicates no genuine desire by Hamas to bridge the gaps between the two sides. Israel is determined to bring back all the hostages. Negotiations will be conducted under fire, and Hamas will return all of our hostages, or, if it does not lay down its arms, will be defeated militarily. And meanwhile, according to new details that were revealed on Tuesday about the hostage deal talks in Doha, Qatar, it turns out that Hamas representatives abroad approached the Trump envoy Steve Witkoff and offered to enter a framework for hostage release and a ceasefire. But they also demanded that the ceasefire extend over 90 days, not the 60 days that are approved by Israel. According to the reports, Israel rejected this offer, and Witkoff approached Hamas in the last 24 hours and announced, "You will not get one day beyond 60 days." Witkoff was also quoted as saying that what he has heard from the terror organization so far is disappointing and completely unacceptable. It's important that everyone understands some of the background to all of this. 600 days have passed since this war broke out. 14,400 hours, no fewer than 864,000 minutes. October 7 caught us all unprepared and exacted an unbearable price. Days and weeks passed, and the penny dropped that a ground incursion into the Gaza Strip was unavoidable, whatever the cost. Even if its cost was very, very high. 416 IDF soldiers have fallen since the ground operations began. 58 hostages are still in the Gaza Strip, and we're sure that at least 20 of them are still alive. But still, there have been 600 days of fighting, during which 193 hostages have returned home. That's not all of them, but it's no small achievement either. To reach this number, Israel operated on countless fronts, military and diplomatic, interwoven with one another. It squeezed the lemon until barely the peel remained, and now With Hamas holding only to a small number of cards, it is digging in and entrenching itself in its position. Hamas is no longer in the posture to which it became accustomed over the years, as every few months saw an intensive rout of fighting that included the launch of hundreds, if not thousands, of rockets into Israel. This drew Israeli airstrikes and perhaps, occasionally, a limited ground maneuver. But that was it. For years, Hamas knew that no matter what it did, Israel would respond with the minimum counterstrikes necessary to restore quiet. Now that has changed, and it is Hamas, not Israel, which is longing for a return to the quiet that existed before this war started by them attacking Israel 600 days ago on October 7th of 2023. Hamas is trying everything that they can think of to convince Israel to stop our counterattacks against them. This is including employing the cruel psychological terror and also impressive achievements in deepening the social rift in Israel between us, Israelis. But one thing that they're not managing to do is to end the war. And that is slowly but surely resulting in the wearing down of Hamas and exhausting the resources and will to continue this fight. Anyone who tells you otherwise is knowingly lying. Hamas is crushed, shattered, almost helpless, but it also knows how to play the game. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will keep doing what we've been doing since the first day of this war, 600 days straight, spreading the truth, letting you know what's happening in Israel, and encourage you to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So guys, if you haven't subscribed to TBN Israel yet and want to stay updated with daily boots on the ground reports, visit TBN Israel on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Now, let's move on to what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Everyone is reporting peak tensions with new details from Benjamin Netanyahu's latest call with President Donald Trump, in which the president said this is not the time to escalate the situation with Iran. Is the White House's pressure campaign on Israel continuing, and if so, why? White House spokesman Caroline Levitt said in a press briefing last Thursday that Trump made it very clear to Netanyahu that he wants to see an agreement with Iran. He doesn't want to take a tougher, more negative option. He wants to see a deal. The president is a man of deals and strongly believes in diplomacy, and he made that clear to the Prime Minister of Israel. On the other hand, TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will tell us in a moment about the United States and their increased military presence on the strategic base in the island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. 2 months after strategic bombers were deployed there, new satellite photographs showed that additional assets, including mid-air refueling tankers and F-15s, have also been moved to that location. So Mati, what exactly is happening in our neighborhood and where do we stand?
Diego Garcia Island, the Indian Ocean. It's not just another dot on the map, it's a strategic milestone that all of a sudden has begun to turn a lot faster. 6 B-2 stealth bombers, a pair of aging B-52s, and a line of KC-135 tankers that look like a flying fuel farm. What message is the US sending to the world and to Iran? And why are whispers of a preemptive strike already circulating all across Tehran? All the while, Donald Trump is on the phone urging Prime Minister Netanyahu and asking him, don't ignite this power keg just yet. The ground is shifting, the planes are moving and warming their engines, and the nuclear clock is ticking at a whole new pace. 2 storylines are colliding tonight. The first one is above the Indian Ocean, and the second in the corridors of the White House. The first one comes from a leaked satellite photo published by Newsweek, the concrete apron of Diego Garcia, which is packed with 6 B-2 bombers, a pair of old B-52s, 6 KC-135 Stratotankers, and additional refuelers. And beside them stand a few F-15s plus C-5 and C-17 transport aircraft. This is no summer training drill. This force is built to deliver bunker-busting munitions 60 meters under the ground and to release dozens of cruise missiles undetected against an enemy that's been waiting for this for a very long time. Simultaneously, the phone lines between Washington and Jerusalem are burning hot. President Trump is speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and at the same time sending a clear message and request, if you look at it from a different perspective. Don't drag me into this while I'm trying to get Iran back to the table for yet another new deal. His team, including Kristi Noem, senior national security officials, and close advisors are all repeating the same mantra time and time again to Israel and to the world. Diplomacy first, bombs later. Netanyahu, for his part, is repeating the red line. Israel will not allow Tehran to acquire nuclear weapons, even if that means acting unilaterally, even possibly against the advice of the US. And this is where the double game truly begins in this ongoing drama between the US, Israel, and Iran. The US is arming an exotic base in the middle of the ocean, perfectly placed for striking Iran and Yemen, while at the same time pressuring Jerusalem not to pull the trigger just yet. Tehran sees the dissonance and threatens a preemptive strike on Diego Garcia itself. It's a long-range warning via short-range missiles. On one hand, they know that the B-2 can vanish from radar and suddenly appear above the Fordow facility, or nuclear facility possibly, without any warning whatsoever. And on the other hand, the Iranian parliament just loves making loud threats, especially while the stealth bombers are still parked on the tarmac in the Indian Ocean. And Israel faces a narrow decision window, which is closing very quickly as we speak. If Washington manages to produce a deal limiting enrichment and storage, Jerusalem gains time. But if the talks collapse, which is a very viable option, that entire force in Diego Garcia turns overnight from strategic signal to kinetic hammer. And then the real question will be, and this is a question in everyone's minds, will the US lead, or will the IDF take the bypass route around Washington and strike within Iran directly, as threats have been made time and time again? Until then, the planes on the island will keep baking in the tropical sun. Sanctions will keep pressing Tehran, and Israel, well, as always, will keep the option of breaking the rules right there on the table. And now that is the real pulse of the Middle East tonight. A quiet boom over the ocean, a scolding call in Washington, and Israel's security chiefs counting the minutes until the skies either go dark or catch fire altogether. In everyone's mind, there's an ongoing question mark. Will Israel actually attack, and does it have the ability to attack? And over recent weeks, and by extension over 10 years of training, the Israeli Air Force, the Israeli Army, and together with the American Air Force, have trained repeatedly and done so publicly with one clear goal: to let the Iranians and let the world know that an imminent attack is a possibility. Just the other week, Israel completed a wide-scale training session where the Israeli Air Force, well, it mimicked exactly what it was planning to do in Iran by running long-range bombing missions that included aerial refueling by Israeli planes, not by the US. And that's important to note because Israel in recent years has built up the capability of striking directly in Iran. And this is not just a small, minuscule, or symbolic attack. We're talking about tens of jets, or possibly more than 100, striking within Iran. We've seen similar things happen in the past, both in Houthi-controlled Yemen and also in Iran in the past year and a half by the Israeli Air Force. And this option is truly on the table. And there's another big thing on the table here, which is the ever-narrowing time frame. Between Iran having multiple automatic snapback mechanisms where first in June and again in October, sanctions are fully placed, and the US will likely do a lot more than just recreate the existing sanctions against them. And at the same time, Israel's window of opportunity, knowing that what we destroyed in past attacks, they will be able to replace as far as air defense and intelligence goes. We now have a historic and possibly once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to truly strike within Iran. That's it for now. Make sure to subscribe and keep up to everything that's happening in this part of the world.
Thank you, Mati Shoshani, for bringing order to the chaos, as you always do. It seems that the picture is far more complex than what's being reported around us. Now, a moment before we switch to our correspondent Shmulik Smadja to interview Amir Tsarfati about the new order in the Middle East, have some important updates from Israel's northern arena. The IDF took out another field commander from Hezbollah's Radwan force in an airstrike on Monday in the Majada Zuan area of southern Lebanon. This is part of Israel's ongoing operations to deny Hezbollah the ability to reconstitute its forces on the border in order to safeguard communities in the Galilee. And meanwhile, the United States is sending strong signals to Lebanon's internationally recognized government that it must follow the example of the El-Julani regime in Syria and move towards normalization with Israel. Deputy United States Special Envoy to the Middle East, Morgan Ortagus, is expected to be in Beirut this week for meetings with officials aimed at encouraging Lebanon to join the regional peace tract. To give some background to this situation, Lebanon recently held municipal elections, and now the local political arena has returned to the sensitive issues that have been on the agenda for years, principally the issue of Hezbollah's weapons. The Lebanese National Army and the police are supposed to be the only people with weapons, and the existence of a heavily armed terrorist militia in their midst has created many problems for everyone over the decades. Now that Hezbollah has been severely weakened by recent events, there is room to look for alternative solutions to many of these problems. And according to Lebanese media, even before the recent municipal elections ended, several developments emerged that may affect the coming period. For most, a reported meeting between Syria's transitional president Ahmed El-Julani and figures linked to the normalization track with Israel. Also, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas, his visit to Beirut is seen as a first step towards removing weapons from Palestinian camps in Lebanon. Conversely, Hezbollah broadcasts a clear, uncompromising line. The organization's Secretary General, Sheikh Naim Qassem, made it clear that dismantling Hezbollah's weapons is off the table until three basic conditions are met: Israel's withdrawal from the territories, cessation of Israeli strikes, and the release of prisoners held in Israel. For Hezbollah, these are not negotiation terms, but red lines preventing any substantive discussion of dismantling the organization's military power. However, there are growing voices in Lebanon, as well as elsewhere in the region, that it's time for Hezbollah to relinquish its weapons, whether it wants to or not, and if it insists on saying no, then they must be forced to do so. This was unthinkable just a few months ago, but now it is being openly discussed. And in my humble opinion, this is a very good and long overdue discussion. And I think that Israel also has something to contribute here. In any case, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in Lebanon, and as always, we ask you to keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Keeping our focus on the northern arena, new details have emerged regarding the talks between Israel and the regime of Abu Muhammad El-Julani in Syria. Citing several sources familiar with the issues, Reuters reported this week that Israel and Syria have direct ties and in recent weeks have held face-to-face meetings to reduce tensions and to prevent clashes on the border. Though direct talks focus on security, aiming to prevent clashes and reduce Israeli incursions into villages near the border, two sources said that they may pave the way for a broader political understandings. In general, Syria's new leaders are trying to show that they are not a threat to Israel. They have met with Jewish community representatives in Damascus and abroad and are arresting two senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad figures who took part in the October 7 massacre, as well as taking steps against other Palestinian terrorists that operate in Syria. In a recent letter from Syria's foreign ministry to the United States State Department, the regime declared that we will not allow Syria to become a source of threat to any side, including Israel. In a related story, thousands of documents and personal items belonging to Israeli spy Eli Cohen, who was Israel's main source of intelligence before being caught and executed in Damascus in 1965, were brought from Syria to Israel recently, and Reuters reported that this was a gesture from El-Julani meant to improve relations with the Trump administration as well as with Israel. All of that is good news, but this is still the Middle East, and things can change very rapidly here, for better or for worse. One thing that still hasn't changed for the better is that the Houthis in Yemen continue to fire ballistic missiles at Israel on a regular basis, including 2 more on Tuesday morning that briefly halted operations at the Ben Gurion International Airport. The attacks were intercepted by Israel's Arrow 3 air defensive systems with no casualties and no damage. These attacks keep coming despite the Houthis admitting earlier this week to suffering enormous losses from Israeli and American strikes on the port of Hodeidah, the airport in Sana'a, and other strategic infrastructures that they control. The Houthis said that direct damage to this infrastructure exceeds $531 million. The indirect losses reach about $856 million due to halted services and disrupted supply flows. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we'll keep reporting on all these issues moving forward. Now let's move on to an interview that will leave you speechless. Our veteran host, Shmulik Smadja, went to interview Amir Tsarfati to understand where things in the Middle East have been heading in recent months. So let's hand it over to Shmulik in the TBN studios in Jerusalem.
Thank you, Yair. Amir, shalom, and welcome to our show.
Thank you.
When we think about the Middle East and when we think about what's going on after the 7th of October, there's no doubt that the Middle East has changed.
Yeah. First of all, the term Middle East is quite new. In the ancient world, the world was divided to the Near East and the Far East. Mm-hmm. And only the British coined that and that was less than 100 years ago. And because that middle one, in between the near and the far, became the one that shapes everything all around us. And any cough in the Middle East affects the markets all across the world. So in the Middle East, of course, we see shifts. Most Muslims around the world are not Arabs. They're actually Malaysians and Indonesians. But most Arabs are Muslims. Mm-hmm. So within the Arabs, just like in every society, you have the secular and you have the religious. Mm-hmm. Within the Arab world, you have the Islamists who wants to spread Islam, and you have the nationalist who wants to make one large Arab nation. And what we see around the world is always the tension between the two of them.
Let's talk about the countries around us.
Okay. Israel is surrounded by 2 tiers. 2 circles, the immediate tier, which is Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, and the larger second tier, which is Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf states. So the first tier was sure that they can beat us, destroy us in 1948. Mm-hmm. And they kept fighting in 1948, in 1956, in 1967, 1973, and they kept losing every war. Eventually, they gave up on the attempt to destroy Israel, and one after the other, they signed peace with Israel. Then came the second tier and started affecting the first tier. So you have Iran invading into Syria, into Lebanon, and trying to invade into Jordan as well. And this is when you see that even secular mixed countries become very hostile towards Israel, like Lebanon. Lebanon was a friend of Israel in a way. Lebanon used to have Christian majority. Lebanon used to be a country that was not really occupied by jihadists. Lebanon has changed once Iran had its grip on it. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing that up until October 7th, mm-hmm. we have a dominant Iran creating a ring of fire all around Israel. Mm-hmm. They're feeding the militias in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, and in Gaza and Judea and Samaria. October 7th changed everything.
So let's talk about the shift of October 7th.
So the eve of October 7th, let's go a day before. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a ring of fire that is waiting for the command to have an all-out invasion into Israel from all sides. The Hezbollah was ready, the militias in Syria and Iraq were ready, and in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, they're all ready. The problem is Hamas jumped the gun mm-hmm. and surprised everybody And because of that, Israel realized this is the time for us to change the paradigm and to change the reality in the Middle East. And we live in a completely different Middle East ever
We talked
since.
about Lebanon, let's talk about Syria. Major changes in Syria.
Correct.
First of all, what happened there? Who's fighting who?
Yeah. Okay.
It's a bit confusing.
It's very confusing
viewers.
because the Middle East is not really the countries that we see today. The countries that we see today are the result of a French-British agreement, the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And that was all the way in the early 1900s, 1916 to be more precise. They were carving the Middle East right before the Ottoman Empire dissolved. And they basically divided the skin of the bear between themselves. And so you see countries that were created, but they were not really organic. They were made of little minorities that never really got along together. So what happened is that Syria was known to be secular. But ever since the war in Syria, since 2011, Assad started losing power, land, and legitimacy. And he needed desperately help. And the help came from unexpected directions. Putin came to help him. Putin wanted a foothold in Syria. He wanted airbase, seaport, and total control on who gets in and out. Then you have Iran. And Iran said, we'll give you money, we'll give you support, but you need to give us free hand when it comes to our own militias. And Iran caused Assad to open the door, and Afghans and Pakistanis and Iraqi militias crossed the border. And before you know it, Syria was unrecognizable. While we go through all of that, Turkey has been plotting for the longest time to take control of Syria. And believe it or not, but the Pages operation is the moment when everything changed, because that was the beginning of the collapse of Hezbollah. Eventually, Hezbollah had to agree to a very humiliating ceasefire. And when the jihadists saw that Hezbollah is neutralized, they knew that's the right time for us to make the move. They stormed into Syria from the north, and within 48 hours, they took over the country. And Syria today is controlled by ex-ISIS/Al-Qaeda terrorists.
But it looks like they want peace. It looks like they want to join into the Abraham Accord. We see now President Trump in the Middle East, mainly in the Gulf countries, and sitting with the new president of Syria, trying to bring them into
the only thing that changed,
civilization, if you
The only thing that changed is the outfit of the president. He took off the robe and he put on a suit. He trimmed the beard a little bit. And as Trump said, he's more attractive right now for the West to, swallow. A man that up until a few months ago had a bounty of $10 million on his head by the Americans, overnight becomes a star that meets and shakes the hands with the U.S. president.
So what's your explanation? Can it be that a terrorist is a freedom fighter?
Don't judge him by the suits, judge him by the educational system. What is the education that he is now introducing to the people in Syria? That will reflect either the change for good or the change for bad in the country.
Let's hope a change for the good.
Yeah, I understand
For our
that.
sake.
Yeah, but we always have to prepare.
Let's talk about Iran. Iran was the head of the snake. Iran was, if you want to say, and from according to what you said, controlled most of those guys. We see a change in Iran.
Yes,
We see a change, to my opinion, comes from a fear. How do you see Iran now and where Iran is going, and how do you see the relationship and the impact of Iran, if at all?
So I can give you an answer based on current events, but I can also give you an answer based on the Bible, because the Bible is indeed talking about Iran with its old biblical name, Persia. So when it comes to current events, Iran that used to control Lebanon and used to control Syria and Iraq, Yemen, and all of that, lost control over most of its arms. The only thing that is still under its control are the Houthis in Yemen, and they're also on the way to break. You can see that already. Something everyone needs to understand about Muslims is they have time. In fact, in the Middle East, desert people have time. They are not rushing towards imminent results.
Solutions.
Everyone here with the Western mindset wants everything now. We want instant gratification because we don't have The Arab world doesn't work like that. The Muslim world has, in fact, in their own Quran, in the 2nd chapter, in the 153rd verse, it says, Allah is with the patient. And the sabirin, the patient ones. And for them, to be patient means that even if you suffer a blow and another one, and even if things are changing in the geopolitical realm, just stoop down a little bit, let that bad thing go. You see, the Iranians know one thing. President Trump has borrowed time, 3 more years. They don't have
Election every 3
of course.
4 years.
So for them, if we need to make some sounds that we make concessions, that they will do whatever it takes. But in reality, you judge them not by what they say, but what they do. And so now the question is, will they give up their ability to enrich uranium? That's all. Because if you really want nuclear program just for the sake of electricity, you don't need to enrich your own uranium. The only countries in the world that enrich uranium are those who hold weapon. So we say, you know what, you want to have a nuclear power? We will give you 3.4% enriched uranium, and you can, work with it. No. They said, no, we want to keep the option of enriching uranium by ourselves. And that, of course, exposes everything.
When we talk about the new Middle East, we cannot not talk about the Abraham Accords, something that President Trump started already in his previous rule when he was sitting in the White House. And we see that he has all the tendency to continue the Abraham Accords. And let's be honest, we were very happy with the Abraham Accords. Israeli went to the Emirates, and if I remember properly, over 200,000 Israelis going to vacation in Dubai and so on.
Yeah.
How do you see the Abraham Accords and where it's going?
The Abraham Accords were brilliant. And the reason why they were brilliant is they exposed the Palestinian scam, basically. Because the Palestinian says, we want 2 states. So Trump says, okay, no problem, I'll give you a state. And when they saw what he gave them, they said, no, that's not what we want. And he said, all right, well, I gave you a chance. Now we can move forward with the rest of them. And he very skillfully convinced the Emiratis and the Bahrainis, and later on the Moroccans and others, that it's for their own benefit. They should not be kept as hostages by the Palestinian narrative that unless you have peace with us first, you won't have any peace with any Arab country in the region. And that broke everything. And thankfully, I think these are the single most important. I think for that, Trump should have won the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't think he needs to fight for getting one now. He should have gotten it already. And the whole idea was to show that through economic relations, you can actually achieve much more. Boycotting Israel.
Which is genius.
It's super genius.
Yeah.
But again, remember, the obstacle has always been they were afraid from what the Palestinian thing is going to do to them if they go too early. So Trump very skillfully said, I have the deal of the century. Remember, the deal of the century was the first thing he brought. And that was, 2-state solution. Okay, fine. Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
It's sad, but it's true.
It is. And so,
I mean, we're talking about the Middle East, we're talking about the new Middle East, we're talking about the huge shifts in the Middle East. What's the opportunities for Israel and what's the risks for Israel?
well, first of all, the opportunities is that we can, for the first time, not be a country that is under siege and under the auspices of other empires and superpowers. Biblically, and I think it's the most important thing.
That was my next question. How do you see the Abraham Accords and those new alliances and new relationship vis-a-vis prophecies and Bible and so on?
Yeah, so biblically, the Bible says that in the coming big war that the world calls it Gog and Magog of Ezekiel 38.
When you say biblically, can you tell us where?
Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel has 4 chapters that are, I call it the days of Ezekiel. I mean, starting from the return of the Jews to the land, for the miraculous rebirth of the land of Israel, from the ashes of the Holocaust in Europe. God is the one who brought us all the way, and God is the one who brought us to our own land. And then Israel becomes prosperous, safe, secure, and prosperous. And one day, when we feel safe, secure, and prosperous, there comes a big war led by Rosh, Meshech, and Tuval, which is Russia of today, To them, Persia will join, and Gomer and the house of Gomer.
To Russia.
First of all, I'm not the first one. You go back to the time of Josephus Flavius, he already knew that this is the countries that are exactly all the way up north from where we are.
And the Bible says in Hebrew, "Mitzapon tipatach hara."
Absolutely. From the north, evil will come, and we will see that. And let's face it, for the Russians, the Russians are energy-oriented economy. Mm-hmm. Israel is a risk for Russia, not because of the Palestinians. It's because we are becoming an energy superpower that is fulfilling the needs of many. And that's
another thing that changed and brought us closer to the finding of natural gas.
Trillions of cubic feet of natural gas off the shores of Israel turned us into something that the Russians wish they had. The Russians want dominance in that market. Now, the Russians are not going to come against us because of jihadist mentality. The Bible says they'll come to
take... that they love the Palestinians so much. That's what you're saying.
No. But when it comes to Russia, it's not just Russia. The Bible talks about Persia that will join them. The Bible talks about Gomer and the house of Gomer, which is the modern day Turkey. So you're talking about a coming coalition. Some will come from ideological, some will come from economical, but they're all going to come and try. And God, the God of Israel, is going to make them find out that this is not a good idea.
Amir Tsarfati, thank you. There's no doubt that we're living in very, very interesting times, which means that the call of God to pray for the peace of Jerusalem is even more realistic and important today. Thank you, and shalom from Jerusalem. Thank you, Amir. Back to you, Yair.
Thank you very much, Mulik. It truly changes the perspective on what's happening in this region. And now, I want to invite you to join me in praying for the peace of Jerusalem. But let's make it personal. So when you pray, let's pray for a soldier, one soldier and his family. Let's pray for one hostage and his family members that are waiting for him in Israel. Let's pray for a civilian in this region, can be in Gaza, can be in Lebanon, can be in Yemen, that is affected by these terrorist organizations. If it's Hamas, if it's the Houthis, if it's Iran, let's pray for their family to have a better leadership and a better future. Let's pray for wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders, and let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.